at the VDOE in the office of, or in the Department of Human Learning. And I think she can correct me because I'm not quite sure I have that right. But she is the language arts specialist for secondary, middle and high school. So I'm really looking forward to her presentation. She's going to update us on some information coming out of that office. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about herself and go ahead and get started. Colleen, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you, Kim. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We have an hour packed of fun. Yes, so I am on the instruction side at the Virginia Department of Education in the Office of Humanities, like Kim said. And so I'm going to share my screen and then we can get started. All right. Let me just make sure everybody can see, and somebody tell me if you can. But the goal today is really to kind of give you an overview of some best practices for literacy in the secondary classroom, things that you can take and use that are available to you, and you know, just how you can maximize that instruction in a co-teaching environment. Okay, so the first kind of the first realm we're going to talk about is looking at this idea of how we can address equity and access in literacy using the resources that we have. And then we're going to go into some updates to the 2017 standards and the curriculum framework and look at the pieces that are really going to be helpful for you when you are planning in a co-teaching situation and when you are implementing that instruction. Then we're going to talk about some best practices when we use those standards, talk about how we can get students to really get involved and have some agency in the actual standards and frameworks so that they understand what the purpose of their learning is. We're going to talk about some resources to help with that unfinished learning that we are all going to be working with when we approach this new year upcoming. And then we're going to explore some resources and professional learning opportunities that are available to you. And I'm hoping that we get to that fast enough so that you have some time to really work through some of the resources, and then we can share out what you find and kind of synthesize some ideas that we talk about. And then I'm going to give you some upcoming events for our SOL conferences and other professional learning that's happening this summer. So please feel free. And this PowerPoint is available in the shared folder, so you can access all of these links and everything there. Okay, so the main objectives today, we want to understand how to support equity and access in literacy instruction, because that is truly at the forefront when we are talking how to get students engaged and really appreciate and learn to be readers and writers and critical thinkers and responsible citizens of our communities. And then we want to understand how to use that framework to support teaching, because sometimes we get so caught up in all of the things that are happening in a school building that we forget to go back to the basics and really look at what's there to support you. And then finally, learn about some available resources that are going to support you in your collaborative setting and moving forward. Okay, so first, I want to just know who's on the line. So as you know, we can do this in the chat first. And then I'm really, again, hoping that we have time to share out later. But just, what is your name? What division or school are you coming from? What are you most excited about this upcoming school year? We've talked about all the things that are, you know, awaiting for us. So what are you excited about? And what are you most anxious about? Because I think when we really recognize those two things, we can kind of hunker down and see what we have as a resource to support both of those things. So just take a minute in the chat and include those things. Oh, we got Hampton City Schools. That's exciting. I can see your name too. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to see your name. Oh yeah, we got a good representation here, everybody. I'm really excited. Nice. Yes, being able to spend time with students in person. That's huge coming up this year. And then what are students bringing back to the table? What are they coming with us to us with after this year of varied learning? Agreed. Definitely. Oh, these are so good. Okay, keep sending them in the chat. And then I'm going to keep going so that we can keep all of these things in mind. Okay, so equity and access in K-12 literacy. So something that is really important that is it's this idea that we want to approach literacy through thematic planning. Okay, so and this is something that we're going to look at that is available to you in some guidance in the teacher's notes in the curriculum framework. But the importance of starting with a theme. So when you think about planning in a collaborative environment and you're working together, you really, really want to think about what is important to your students, knowing the community that you are in, and knowing, what topics are important to students and what topics may be unfamiliar to students because they just don't have the background knowledge of certain topics based on just based on their own background and understanding. So that's a really big piece to promoting and really growing that interest and inquiry. So you want to pick thematic topics, concept-based units that are talking about topics that are relevant to our students and that have the opportunity to present reading and articles about current events that are important to our students. Really thinking about these bigger concepts that relate to what's going on in our students' lives, but then also making sure, like we were just saying, that you have the opportunity to present new ideas, new points of views that are maybe not as familiar to our students, and opening up those perspectives and allowing students to ask questions and have conversations. Because when we spend a decent amount of time in that first part of introducing a unit and getting students to have opinions about these certain topics, then we can jump off and have them research and communicate and read and write about what we want them to explore in a topic. So that's really kind of this visual of we start with a theme or a concept that's important to our students or that's very relevant. And then that will allow us to promote student choice, integrating the 4 strands, focusing on specific skills, spiraling those essential skills that maybe have been missed in our unfinished learning, and then also giving background knowledge to topics that students may not know, or promoting those 5 C's, making our students critical thinkers, citizens, and very active participants in the community. Okay, so what does that look like? Well, we want to talk about this idea of diverse texts in a theme. So we've got our theme, and we've decided what's important to our students. So how are we going to get our students to look at various types of texts? Well, we want to provide diverse text. And when we talk about diverse text, we mean texts that cover all of these things. So we want texts that are reflecting timely real-world experiences and current events. We also want to have diverse representation in characters, characters that represent the cultures of the students in our community, but they also introduce characters, stories, and people that represent cultures outside of the community. And we want to provide opportunity for students to explore and see where they fit and what they think about these different texts. So that's what we mean when we say diverse text and thinking about equity and access through literacy. So we want to have texts that students are familiar with and that they really enjoy reading, but we also want to have texts that may be more challenging in terms of ability or level. And we want to have texts that also are introducing our students to new ideas and new experiences. So this is the variety when we talk about diverse texts. You want to have, as many possibilities as you can think of in the theme or unit. So when you're thinking about planning, and you and your co-teacher, you have decided I think this is a really good theme that our students are really going to sink their teeth into and get invested. And you start to pull, and you're looking at your standards and you're starting to pull texts that really highlight this theme or topic, but also show various opportunity to teach the skills that you want to teach in English. So you want to have books, plays, articles, um, uh, what are they called? Instruction manuals, any kind of varied text so that students have an opportunity to experience and work on skills in different types of texts. So you may have these three anchor sets of text that you really want the students to work with, whether you're in a guided experience, and you're working one-on-one, or you're working in a small group, and or you want students to at least have these three particular texts that that you and your teachers have decided this is going to showcase the skills that we really want them to work on their own independently. But then you also have a library of varied texts that students can work on these skills while they're not with you, or while they're moving through different ideas in this topic. So we want the students to be able to get to that comparing and contrasting of different texts and analyzing those texts to increase that level of thinking. But that student choice is really important. So again, I may choose for students to have these three texts to look at and use as models, but you can go over here and pick 4 different texts that you might find interesting throughout the unit. Okay. And then, this again is where that theme comes into play and can be so powerful, because it allows you to just gather as many opportunities for students to look at texts. So that's the difference between the diverse text and the variety in text, when we're talking about students being able to have access and provide equity throughout a unit. So then we break it down and we think about, well, okay, so what does authentic vocabulary look like when we're planning a unit? And vocabulary, as we get older and out of elementary school, we know that we really want to reinforce this idea that it should be coming from the text that you're looking at. So when you're planning together, if you start to look at words, you may see words in there, knowing your students that they need to know in order to understand the text, because you need the background knowledge, right? But you also may have opportunities in a lesson where students can explore the words that are unfamiliar to them. So that's this idea of authentic vocabulary building, because we know and research supports that students do not comprehend and retain new words if it is not used in the context. So that's really important. We can have, a station or a section of the lesson that's dedicated to looking at maybe words that we don't know. And then talking about them using context, or providing them with the opportunity to go look the word up and then apply that knowledge to the text and to the word. So just keep that in mind when we talk about word study and word knowledge, because that is part of the standards in our reading strand. And of course, we have our research. So how do we address these ideas in student-driven research? Okay. We do know that we have to teach our students at some point in the English classroom how to conduct research. We need to teach them about primary sources and plagiarism. But that doesn't have to be the end all be all way that we teach research or that we promote research. So again, thinking of topics that are interesting where students are going to start asking questions or have their own thoughts, we can then allow for that exploration of the topics within that theme. And that may become a short piece or an independent part to a unit or theme. But we want to really highlight too that it's an ongoing and frequent exercise when we research. We don't just stop everything and go do a research paper, because that's not necessarily the only way that students or people in the real world research. If we want to know something, we look it up, we Google it. But, we provide those opportunities for students to really think about what else they want to know about a topic. And then that is then a gateway or entry point to start teaching those skills for research and really incorporating those strands. And then making research a part of the learning process through those student generated questions. If a student starts to spark interest, we do not want to stomp that out. We want to promote it. So we either provide texts or we give them, we talk about search terms, and then allow them to go and explore through through the lens that they are interested, and it becomes less teacher focused and more about what the students are interested in. So that is something to keep in mind, because I think sometimes it happens very naturally, when we are talking to students and we're talking and they have questions, and we're like, go look it up. So that's an opportunity when these present themselves in instruction to really maximize that opportunity to look at those research standards and say, where could we fit this in to a unit or a lesson? And that goes back to that whole idea of integrating the 4 strands. And of course, writing. So as we get further into our secondary education, we know that we really want to start promoting readers as writers and writers as readers. And we want students to be able to have reflection. And that sometimes is a really good opportunity for students to start writing, because it's not, it's not something that they have to go provide evidence for at first. It's a reflection, asking students to write about what they read. What do they think? Because once we get them to say what they think about a certain topic or what they've read, then we can go back in a different lesson and say, all right, we'll pull that back out and let's see if you, can you provide me any evidence from the text that supports what you think? And so we get into that textual evidence, and it's a natural progression into that part of the writing process. And always we want to use our authors as models. So when students have a reaction to a text, we want to, say, what did you like about this author? What did you not like about this writing? How could you use this in your own writing if you did like it? And what would you do differently if you didn't? And that's really where that conferencing and feedback is so important in our writing instruction, because it allows students to see that we are writing for a purpose, or we are analyzing the writers that we are reading. And another point too is really looking at this idea of variety and purpose. We want students, to have a reason to write, and it's not going to be to write for my teacher. What is the authentic experience that you want them to write? Do they have an opinion? Well, then where can you write that opinion and put it forth to something that might be, impactful to the community or to the school, or even to themselves. So just thinking about these elements as we think about ways to encourage writing and how we can get our students to become invested in that process. And this is just a visual too about, in general, reading promotes that deeper learning and critical thinking. So we want students to have opportunities to read daily. We want them to have time to read books that they like, or stories or texts that they enjoy. But then we also need to provide them opportunities to read extended pieces of those texts and grade level material. At the end of the day, their end of course, or their the assessment that is at the end of the year will be based off of grade level texts. So we don't, we do a disservice to our students if we do not promote or allow them to have guided experiences and then independent practice with texts that are on grade level. Even for students who are needing a little more support or scaffolding, that's okay, but they're still working within the vocabulary and the topics that are in grade level texts. And that's how our teachers, you all, can support this work. We provide those opportunities. Maybe we have one small group working on a text that's a grade level text with, in small group. but we also have another set of students who are reading independently in their own, and then they are switching. And in those small groups, or when we have time to work with one-on-one with students, we want to make sure that we are modeling ourselves how we analyze ideas into text and how we talk about topics. So, I'm reading this particular text about a topic, and you're reading this. So let's look at them together and let's talk about, like, how does this author present this idea? What do you think of this? And then do you think that it works better in a poem? So this kind of idea of really modeling that authentic thinking about two texts on the same point of view, that's really important. All right, so in summary of this kind of this part of the presentation, really looking at a scale of balance when we talk about equity. So there's so much research about the importance of giving students relevant text and having them have interest in books that they love, and giving them time in text, and allowing them to have those foundational skills. That is one piece of the puzzle. And that is really the way that we can give students access to the world of literature and literacy. But we don't want to forget that we want them to grow. We want them to continue to challenge themselves and challenge use their ideas to challenge others. So that's where we also have to provide that rigor in terms of text level, giving them grade level text, showing them distinguished writing. What's somebody who has a real opinion about a topic, and here's how they use their words and write to show what they think. And really being intentional about what we're giving them. And then incorporating those 5 C's through these texts and using the standards. So it really is a balance of both. And we have to be able to give those to our students when we're planning and delivering instruction in literacy. Okay, so that's the overview and of wanting to have that in your mind when you're planning together and when you're thinking about how you're going to approach instruction. The other piece to that, though, is the framework. Okay, this really is your guide in looking at what we want our students to do. Okay, so I'm just using an example here of some 8th and 9th grade pieces of the framework, but again, this is explicit in all grade levels, so you can use whatever grades you are working with, and also the grades before and the grades after, to help support instruction where students are and how they're coming in at varied levels when we get them, especially this fall. Okay, so in the framework, you've got in each, you have your 4 strands. And then within the strands, you have teacher's notes at the beginning of each strand. So this is really your guide to kind of get you thinking about how you want to plan. And so we do talk about this seamless integration of the strands, natural ways that we can promote communication, reading, writing, and research together, just like what we talked about at the beginning, right? So, looking at that 3rd bullet, while whole group instruction can be centered on a shared text, teachers can provide opportunities for student choice with both fiction and nonfiction, because that's another piece. We always want to be promoting fiction and nonfiction together. And as much, as you all are a lot of times the gateways in secondary to, the interdisciplinary approach, because you see what history is doing, and we see what science might be doing, and we can use these skills in the literacy skills and the English skills in these other content areas. And so a lot of times in co-teaching situations, that is where that bridging can be so powerful. So just something to think about. But yeah, so this is for reading, and then it's also, again, an example of writing. So, I think the first bullet there is something to highlight too, because we want to recognize the difference between teaching writing and assigning writing. We don't want students to just be given a prompt and say, go write, and then go back. We want to teach that process from the beginning to the end, and not in one sitting. right? So, if we're showing students how to, we want students to start thinking about what they want to write about in terms of a topic that's interesting to them. Well, we want to start with some pre-writing, and we as the teachers model that and allow them to give input. And we say, well, no, I don't really think that that's going to be important to a topic or the audience that I'm trying to get at. So I'm going to take this out. And talking through that process is the teaching of writing versus assigning. So that's just something to think about. But in the framework, you have this as your guide to start thinking about how you're going to plan instruction within each of the strands. So just remember to check that out, because a lot of times, again, we get so, caught up in the school year and planning and having to, do one thing to the next, that we forget that we have some of these guidance and supports right in front of us to use every day. Okay, so thinking about connecting the skills and teaching the full strand. So when we're planning and we're looking at what skills, what strands and standards we want to teach, and we're looking at what skills we're going to have to get our students to know and understand, we really want to make sure that we're connecting the full standard up there to the skills that are going to support students getting to that level, at that grade level. So if I know that we're supposed to be teaching 6.5A, and students are going to have to be identifying the elements of narrative structure, and that's going to include setting, character, plot, conflict, and theme. And let's say we've decided to work just on plot at this point. So when we're planning together, we have to come down here to this essential knowledge, skills, and processes and look to see exactly what a sixth grader needs to know in terms of that particular part of plot. So that means that we're going to have to focus on how the conflict and resolution develops. We're going to have to look and see about sequence of events and stories. The writer's map for what happens, how it happens, to whom it happens. All of those things have to do with plot. And that's also, I see, where there's an opportunity for us to kind of analyze writing and then be able to write it ourselves. So there's that overlap in our curriculum framework where we can see how to start incorporating that. So if I know that that's all the things that students are going to have to know, then we need to make sure that that's involved and that is planned out when we're looking at how we're creating a unit or a lesson on plot. So that's another really important piece, to make sure that we are teaching the full standard and we're connecting it to the skills that are in that framework. So the other piece to that, and this is a really helpful strategy when you're planning, right? So let's say that we're a 9th grade team and we are looking at 9.5 B and C, making inferences and drawing conclusions, and then analyzing the author's qualifications, viewpoint, and impact. And I look down here in the framework and we're talking and we see that, okay, we need our students to be able to identify and infer the main idea from a variety of, complex texts. And then I see that they're going to need to organize and synthesize that information from at least 2 texts. Well, maybe we've been looking at this for a couple of days and we've kind of noticed that we have students in our classroom who they're not at the level of synthesizing yet. We're not there yet. We're still trying to, determine what an actual point of view is in one text. So that's where we can look back at the framework that comes before, the grade level that comes before, and say, okay, so if we know we need to get them there, so where are our students, what was supposed to be happening, the year before or the year before? What do they need to do before they can get to that? Because the framework builds from kindergarten through 12th. All of our skills in the English curriculum framework, they build and spiral upon each other. So you will be able to find what you're working on in the grade levels before and the grade levels after. So then we can come over here. All right, so let's go back to 8.6 and say, okay, so I know that we really gotta work on this skill of just determining an author's point of view or purpose in a text. So I might pull those students who are showing that they still need some support with that And I might have them choose a text from the topics, within the theme that we've picked and within the text that we've chosen. And we're going to look at determining the point of view of the text. And then once we have that grounding and understanding, we can scoot over and send them to, working more on synthesizing with two texts and seeing, what the point of view is. So really using that framework to talk and plan is so helpful. And it's something that can happen, you can go back after a lesson and say, this isn't working, let's see what we're missing. Or you can start when you're planning. It really is a great guide to have whenever you're thinking about planning or revising your lessons and instruction. Okay, so then the other piece to that is getting our students to understand what it is exactly that they're doing, right? So taking time in the beginning of class to talk about what we're expecting of our students and why we're expecting that is really important. I know that we have a lot of different approaches to how we get at learning targets or our objectives for the day. But remember that if we do not take, if they just sit on the board and we don't ever talk to them or bring them to life, then it just becomes like one more thing that students walk past in our classrooms, and we don't bring it to them to really think about what skills they need to know. So it's really important when we're looking at building that academic vocabulary for our students who need that support, and working on skill development. So what is the difference between identify and determine? And we've gone back and forth and looking at this too. Can you identify what a main idea is, first of all? But then can you determine that main idea within a passage or within a piece of text? And what's the difference? And asking students to really think about that too. Because when they can provide their input, it makes all the difference in the world when you start to actually implement that instruction. So something to just consider, and having those conversations together. And also allowing students to reflect. So preflection, starting before we even teach. This is what we're supposed to be looking at today. What does this even mean? What does it mean to determine something? What's that different from identifying? And then midpoint, planning, in our lessons at midpoint to say, hey, let's stop at this particular part in our lesson. And if this is where we end for the day and we got to pick it up next time, that's fine. Because the more input we put this way, we get more out and we see more understanding from our students. So allowing students to really talk about what they're learning. Can you tell us what are you learning? And why are you learning that? And how does that relate to this concept or this theme that we're talking about? Can they connect it to a purpose outside of the classroom? This one's huge. This is the why. Why are you learning this particular skill? Why are we talking about this? And I think that's something that really is important for students to be able to understand why and to be able to put a purpose to that. And so it may be so that we can write a letter to our principal about a certain topic that we're concerned about, or it's so that we have better knowledge about, what we think about a certain topic based on these two authors, and then being able to provide my own opinion as a student or as a person using this evidence. So can they connect that learning to the outside of the classroom? And then can we provide our students, are we allowing them to apply that skill in more than one scenario? So I've given you this, way we're talking about it, and I can tell that you're understanding what we're talking about and you've comprehended it. Now I want you to take it over and apply it in a different scenario or a different setting. And these do not have to be complex, but when you are planning, this is a really important conversation to have together as co-teachers. Or if you are not seeing this in the lessons that you're working with, then you want to ask these questions and say, where are we giving students opportunity to show us that reflection? So taking that and then thinking about when we're planning, this lesson example is coming from our VDOE English Comprehensive Literacy Plans site, and that provides you with, they're written by Virginia teachers, and there are so many, there's an abundance of them, and they are broken down, and I'm going to give you the link, but they're broken down by strand and grade band. So, if you're looking for a reading lesson, then you can look on there and see, you can pull one up on a specific skill, and then you can pull whatever you want. You can teach the whole thing, or you could pull the resources that are provided within that lesson. So they really are there for you guys as a resource. But I put this in here just to show, because I know that a lot of divisions and school buildings have their own format for lesson planning. But when you are working with your teachers and you are planning those lessons, this is not kind of a rhetorical, questions to consider. These are questions that you really could ask each other and guide that planning. So, all right, if this is what we're teaching and we want our students to, to really focus on simile, metaphor, and personification in this lesson, then, what do we expect to see in our teaching? Like, what are we supposed to be doing? And so these kinds of conversations are really helpful too, because you're taking it from the plan and thinking about how it's going to look in instruction, in the actual teaching. And then how are we going to demonstrate understanding? How many opportunities are we providing students? Because sometimes our students really do understand what's going on, but the task that we've given them to show that understanding isn't the best fit for that student. So, before we assume that student is not getting what we're doing, we want to make sure that, that we've given them more than one opportunity to do that. So these questions are here for you to use as a guide when you're talking with your teacher, your co-teacher, and you're really thinking about what this is going to look like in instruction and how we're going to use it, how we're going to take this written lesson and really get it, put it into action. And this here is also for you as just a support and guidance about, really good practices for literacy instruction. And I want to say too, like, so engaging instruction aligned to the standard, that first one on the left there. That doesn't mean, we're doing this fun activity where we're going to throw the ball back and forth and everybody's going to say something about what they think about a topic. Yes, that might be fun and engaging, but we're talking about, is it engaging instruction? Are we engaging the standards? Are we really teaching what we said we are teaching? So this is, not to be used as a checklist or any kind of, anything like that. It's just something for you all to use when you're planning and when you're thinking about how we can start to teach this instruction in coming from the written plan. And these are, like the other ones, are just guiding questions for you guys to consider. So, like, what skills are students working on? Well, okay, where are we seeing this in the plan? And how are we going to teach it? How are we going to show understanding? What different ways can we show the understanding? So this is did we do that? A lot of times we can use these questions after we've taught, and when we find a quick minute in the busy day that we have, but to circle back around with our co-teacher and say, okay, I don't think, these 3 students, I don't think they had an opportunity to show understanding, with this particular skill. So I want to pull them and really look and see if they do understand, so that we can either provide support or move forward. And then having that quick conversation. So these are good, topic questions to keep you on, to keep you focused. So that way, when you only have 5 minutes to work together, you can use these to do that. So that's the written, the taught, and then now the assessed. This is actually coming from a webinar series that instruction and assessment did together, where we pulled sample texts and passages. And this on the right-hand side, this annotated part, is really just looking at how we ask questions and get our students to come back to the, and check for understanding, and how they're coming back to the skill that we're getting them to look at. And these are available to you, these resources. You can use them in the classroom. You can use them as a model and take it for another text. But you see up there, so we know that we want to set the purpose to focus either on identifying skills that will be introduced, or skills that need to be reviewed for reading. And so, you know, maybe we want to talk about summarizing. And so when we're looking at this passage, we might ask the students in 2 sentences, summarize what you've read so far about Frederick Carter. Well, that's a real quick formative check to see if we are comprehending what we're reading and if we are able to summarize, if we are able to pick out a summary. But it's kind of reversed because the student is doing it. So please feel free to use these, but also think about when you're looking at ways to assess that we are going back and making sure that it's aligned to the actual skill and standard that we want them to know. Okay. Whew, I feel bad, guys. I'm so sorry I'm talking so much. I'm trying to get through all this so that you can use it and go explore. And I hope that we have time for this, but I think we're okay on time. Okay, so addressing unfinished learning resources and supports. So this is an article from Ed Week that really focused on, and I liked it because it talks about this misconception that we have to remediate our students when we're addressing unfinished learning, and that's actually not what research supports, and it's not what research says is best practice. So thinking about how we can keep moving, but using, like we just talked about, our standards and our framework to figure out how to fold in those other missing pieces as we are moving along and keeping our students engaged in relevant texts. And so that's something that you might want to check out, but it's a resource here for you to consider. Also, when we look at our unfinished learning, so this is called our tracking logs. And we started these when the shutdown happened, when we were starting to come back and look at the beginning of this school year and how we were going to address unfinished learning. But we've updated them now to this past school year. We've updated them to work for this school year. So this is very similar to the process that we were just looking at, where we looked at the 8th grade standard for the same standard that's being taught at the 9th grade level. We have one for every single grade level. And it's got the standards broken down, and it kind of shows you where the grade level before or the grade level after is really working on that skill too, where you could fold in those skills. So if you're teaching 9th grade and you know that you're working on 9.4K, which is about comparing and contrasting, you can look over here to see that actually folds into 8.5G. And that is where that gets into comparing and contrasting details in literary and informational nonfiction texts. So you can talk to your teacher, your co-teacher, and this is also really helpful vertically. So you can say, okay, I've got these 9th graders. Let me call back down or email to the middle school or whatever grade level is before and say, how much do you think we need to work on this in terms of what was addressed and what was not? So you can use these however are most helpful for you, but they are there, and it's a good guide to just kind of see those connections between grade levels when thinking about how to fold in that unfinished learning that is going to be hitting us in the fall. This is coming from our website, from the Virginia Department of Education put out a Virginia Learns, and thinking about what are the essentials of English instruction. And if we had to really focus on the components that we do not want our students to miss, this is pretty much it. These are strategies that support the best practice for reading. So as long as we are working on these, the other skills will fold in as we move throughout our standards. So this is available to you on our website. It's also available in this PowerPoint, as you see. So you can use this as kind of a guide to think about like the true essentials of reading, writing, research, and communication strands and best practices for everyday literacy instruction. And this is what I was talking about, the addressing unfinished learning. So this is the landing page. And when you get to the language arts section, you see over here that you have the essentials of each grade band. And so they're basically like little bubbles that connect a reading strand to a writing strand, a communication, and a research. So that's showing how you can use all 4 strands together with different strategies. So totally encourage you to check that out when you get a chance. And this is what it looks like basically. And then you would click on either the 6 or 8, 6 to 8 or 9 to 12 and see the different ways that you can combine the 4 strands. Okay, so this is the fun part. So we're going to put it all together, and I'm going to show you what an example might be of planning an integrated strands through a thematic unit. And then I'm going to put some links in the chat and then let you all go forth and conquer. Okay, so think about what we've all talked about and what, knowing the community that you're serving, what might be an important topic for your students. And feel free to put those in the chat because we learn from each other. And so it's really a good way to kind of think about like what's relevant in terms of what our students are worried about, what they care about, what's going on in their world. So think about that and have that in mind as we go through this. Okay, so looking at this idea of paired text, diverse text, text variety, right? So we want to make sure that we are providing some sort of fiction. And this would be for 6 through 8, but you could totally modify this theme of immigration for whatever grade level you are teaching. So we've got a fiction book that we might use as an anchor text that we might pull some passages out, not read the whole thing together because that that's not maximizing the instruction, but pulling excerpts that really highlight this topic, but also highlight the skills that we might be working on. And then Common Lit is a very, very resourceful website that provides free and open resources, and all of their texts you can find in a theme. And so you can look up different topics and they will have resources for you. So that's a really good resource. But so I might pull a nonfiction text from here. And then I might go to one of my Virginia resources to find interviews of primary sources. And this is coming from, it's a website that provides oral stories about immigrants who have migrated to America and their experience and their stories. So you see, we've got multimodal texts, and we have different opportunities for students to choose within a theme of what they're going to look at. Another opportunity is the Virginia. This is coming from the Gallery of Virginia History, and you will have that access to. But students can analyze what that sign says, and then connect it back to how it relates to that theme that we're talking about. Okay, and so again, like I say, you all are a lot of times the glue that holds our interdisciplinary connections together in the secondary world. So thinking about how we can use current topics to get to historical, more, topics that are separated from our students because they are just not familiar with them. So this is kind of comparing, the point of view from the journals of Lewis and Clark on Sacagawea mixed with the Washington Post article for the Charlottesville votes to remove another statue, and more controversy follows. So we can look at different points of view and compare and contrast two texts here about a bigger topic. Then we can build in that writing piece. So notice here in these different examples that we start with something kind of short. So analyze, the journal entry to describe the role Sacagawea played in the expedition. So this might be an activity for our students who are not maybe quite at the level where they can, compare two texts, but they're still working on that comprehension piece, and they're describing really what the main idea or the topic is from those journals. They're still looking at one text, but notice we're still analyzing, and so that's key, and we're reflecting through writing. Then you have look at the statue and describe what it shows and how you know. So you're using textual evidence there, but you're still looking at one text. And so it provides that support and scaffold for students who still need to work on the core of getting to that instruction for that skill. And then having students read the article, examine the statute, take a position on its removal. Well, now we're looking at, we're building into that two texts piece, but we're looking at something that might be more approachable because we're examining a picture of the statue. And then we're looking at an article. So it's kind of a scaffold into getting at those two texts, but it's not so overwhelming because it's only one text and then you're still able to look at an image, but you have to take a position, which we know in instruction for writing is very important at the secondary level. And then over here on the right, you've got, more expanded opportunities to show and get to the critical thinking and the comparing and contrasting and the analyzing using that support with bigger, more complex situations. So thinking about how you can plan and build in different opportunities that students might be working on all of these at different times. It's just, but they're there, they're planted in, and that's really the power of planning through theme and through a bigger lens. And so this is another example, looking at a poem and an excerpt from Encyclopedia Virginia, and being able to have students compare and contrast. And so you're looking at shorter writing assignments for students who still might need that support, or something that you just need you need to know if students can do, and we can all use the short writing idea. But explaining why the texts are paired. So that's still getting to the analysis, right? But we're making sure that students are able to tell us what's going on in both of those passages that are similar. And that comparing and contrasting. So again, these are here for you to use as models. You can use these as a whole unit, but just consider how we can build in ways for students to grow throughout their learning in a unit. And this is another way that you can build in and provide, input when you're planning on using social studies and science. So, you might use online, some sort of online themed resource like in Common Lit, and then you can compare it to an excerpt from Kurt Vonnegut, and then, maybe consider, we all know our students love to hear, they love music, and it's a great way to really feel an era or a tone or a mood. So considering how we can do that. Okay, so it's 11:38. You literally have like no time. So I was going to give 20 minutes to this, but what I would like for you to do is I'm just going to put some links in the chat. And if you will take the opportunity to just kind of look through what is in there, and then we can come back and share. So let me put this in here. Also, if you have any questions while we're doing this, please feel free to ask away.
And Colleen, you can have until 11:49 because or 50 or 54 because I owe them 6 minutes from yesterday, but you can take that time.
Okay, well, it'll be your
Okay.
time, I promise. I won't be talking to you. I'm just going to give you the resources to go and prosper. All right. So this coming at you first is the comprehensive literacy plans page. Okay. And then the next one is, this is the Library of Prints and Photographs. It's their online gallery. And this is great for finding resources from Virginia history that students, students may not have any idea about some of the texts or the background knowledge that you're working on. So you could use that. And again, feel free to start looking through, and we will come back together at, let's say 11:46, and just, get some ideas of how we can use some of these resources together to support this instruction, and really think about how we can help our students. All right, and then this one coming at you is the VMFA landing page, which they have amazing resources for students and teachers, and they also kind of group things by theme. Then we have the Virginia History Explorer, which is cool because that one has collections of primary documents and articles and pictures. So that's a good one. Encyclopedia Virginia is coming towards you. And again, you have this all in this PowerPoint, but just to kind of look around now. And then the Digital Library of Appalachia is an amazing resource and has so many great images and stories. Virginia Memory, and like 2 more. Also, if anybody else has resources that they know of that you want to put in the chat too, feel free, because again, we learn from each other and we get our ideas best from collaborating with each other. So anything that you also know of, please put in the chat for everybody. And then here's also the link to Common Lit, if you wanted to look through some of their themed work. Okay, so I'm going to be quiet and give you like literally 30 seconds, but you now have them. Selena, I see your message about the, let me see, that one might be a different page at this point. Let me see. Also, Gail, I see that students struggling with Common Lit assessment questions. So I'm going to say this: I would never don't use the assessment part of Common Lit. Only use the texts, and you develop what's best for your students based on how you're using that text. If that makes sense, I hope that helps, because we actually talk about that a lot. Like News ELA and a lot of these other resources that school divisions use, they're great for the resources in terms of the text that you can get, but they don't always fit best in terms of assessment and alignment to the Virginia standards, if that helps. Okay, so in just the sake of time, as you're researching that and you're looking through those, I want to just take you through some of the other upcoming events that are happening this this summer. So right, this is the link to our comprehensive instructional plans. I'm telling you, take that and run with it however you would like. But they are really good resources, and they often provide text that we, as the Virginia Department of Education, cannot endorse any specific product or type of text. And so they often provide the texts that are really helpful and supportive, and they provide links to get there. Yes, so this is the Library of Congress collection. They do a lot of themed units in terms of pictures and images that you can pull from. So that's always a great resource to have. Here's another example of a text from Common Lit that talks about the 8 White Sox that are indicted, and then giving students, like, here's what what baseball players used to wear in the 20s. And then one extra little piece of, historical primary sources here about, the baseball lineup for that particular year. So, just thinking about ways to get students exposed to different topics and different parts of history. Bunk history, that's cool. That's right out of Richmond, and it is, you see here, it's also based off of themes. And then when you click on that, you get a bunch of different resources within those themes that are put together from right here in the capital of Virginia. And then don't forget the arts. Again, those are always ways to include, you know, interest or just exposing students to new information. And then you have your VMFA and some other resources that I gave you through the thing. And I think this one actually works, Lena. I think that other link, I might have miscopied it. So out of being in a hurry. So you will have this, and please feel free to explore. That's what we were gonna do, but we're not to save time. But if you think about it, you know, if you want to use this with your collab teachers, or you're working together and you want to just kind of go through and use this as an opportunity to choose your own adventure and think how you can modify something that's already been suggested as a unit, or something that you really like and you think could be even better if you added a different resource or made it a little bit longer of a unit. Feel free to use these as an activity. This is also coming from assessment, which you have you have the link to that. But just thinking about when we select our texts, and that's what I was getting back at the Common Lit assessments. The best suggestion I can give is to make sure that you are looking at texts that really authentically present what skills you're looking at. If you want to teach imagery, find a text that is really, really good at showing how an author uses imagery or different types of figurative language, or something that's a little bit more obvious of a main idea or a point of view that you're trying to get your students to look at. So really be conscious when you're selecting text and thinking about how you're going to use them. That's really important. And then look at the grade level SOLs. That is important too. The texts, kind of have that whatever you're trying to teach. But if it doesn't and you still like the text, then either put it down and save it for another time, or find the SOLs within that text that maybe you've already taught and you can go back and circle that as reinforcement, or you save it for that particular skill. And then, looking at how you can use sample question starters and really using that model of what students are going to have to know and be able to answer. And then also always looking for new instructional resources to have for the upcoming year or the next time that you teach that unit. So again, this is the same thing that we looked at. We talked about this too, really looking at what the different grade levels are saying that we have to know at that grade level in terms of what students need to be able to do with that standard. And then here's some examples. And again, you have all of this linked in this PowerPoint. Just some different sample question starters. And again, our comprehensive literacy page. And I'm hurrying, Kim, I'm hurrying everybody. Please, though, I am going to take a minute. This is for the summer in August, and we're doing them in the evening. It's our SOL conferences, and we're trying to get them to you as in the most opportune time, because school will be starting back, and we want you to just turn your cameras off and get all of these resources. So if you sign up for this, please do. The link is live up there, and we are already up to like 1,200 participants. So please sign on. But just know that the 2 nights per grade band are different. So you would get, both nights of new information. So please come check these out. This is really like showing you how teachers are across the Commonwealth are using these resources and using these practices with actual resources that you can take. So please sign up for that. It's going to be good. Also, this is an upcoming July 12th through 16th professional development for teaching with primary sources. This is also linked in, and it's our Learning in Place, shows you different resources that are similar to Common Lit, but you can also access them, and they're free and open resources, and they're done by grade band. This is our professional development on demand that's on our site, and this is actually grouped. We grouped all of our webinars, our PowerPoints, and our instructional plans based on topics that might be interesting or you might need support on. So please check these out. Again, the link is in here. And here they all are, including the progression charts, your framework, a couple of assessment links, all of our 2019 and 18 English standards and institutes and conferences, because that's when we started really pushing the 2017 supports for the 2017 standards. And I just want to thank you for being flexible and being here virtually, because nothing's better than when everybody's in person, but here we are. And I wish you the best of luck this coming year, and please stay in touch. We answer our own emails. We are here for you for whatever you need. So always reach out. And I just want to thank you all for being here, and good luck.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I can tell from the comments, a plethora of resources, great information, just having so much to think about as folks prepare for next year, some inspiring resources, and you're a great motivator. So thank you so much for your time.